I'm going to go ahead and get started here. Thank you all for attending. Tonight, this Theasauristes Academy, I'm recording it and we'll share it on Asana for anyone who wasn't able to be here in person. And this is a bit of a kickoff to what we call our Summer Leadership Series, which is a series of webinars kind of targeted towards specific topics or officers or chairs to help you along as you're thinking about what we're all going to do this fall semester. This is very presentation based. That said, if you have any questions, please take yourself off mute and ask away or raise your hand or put something in the chat, and I'll do my best to monitor for it. Um, but like I said, this is primarily set up to be a presentation that we record and share. Um, and like I said before, please feel free to ask questions. And on top of that, at the very end, we'll take a couple minutes to uh, just make sure you're comfortable with everything you heard. If you have any specific chapter questions, I've got time tonight to help you out as soon as we get done. Um, but in general, well, let me uh, start again because this is where I'll start and stop the recording. Today at the 2026 Thesaurists Academy, we'll be going over how to build an effective budget, best practices, and third-party vendors that can help us collect dues. We'll talk about fundraising and how the role of it in our chapters, and then a whole bunch of fun terminology around taxes, tax ID numbers, and the language around them. But things that, well, I hope they don't keep you up at night as a chapter treasurer. I do want to be sure you're aware of them. But let's start with the most important thing every treasurer does, and that's building a budget. Um, now, a, a budget is simply an estimate of the income and expenses over a set period of time that we'll have with the chapter. Um, you may have heard the terms income and expense report or a profit and loss report. It's basically that, but then projected out for each semester and for your entire year. Um, Now, building a budget isn't difficult, I swear, but it is something you have to be intentional about, especially if you want to build an effective one. And every one of our chapters is different. Some of you have houses, some of you have to collect rent, some of you have kitchens and meal plans, some of you work with third party accountants because of all that I mentioned before and don't do this in house. But at the same time, I would say the majority of our chapters, it falls on the chapter treasurer to handle these things. And I'm going to review this from a chapter operations side. Again, once housing gets involved, it becomes much more complex. That's where you should be working closely with either an accounting firm or your alumni association, and hopefully both. But if you were just dealing with the chapter operations, it's a lot easier to understand. Um, but again, even if you're dealing with rent and meal plans, it is absolutely the chapter's responsibility to ensure that dues, rent, etc., are being paid in full and in a timely fashion, or at least there's transparency about what's going on between the chapter members and either the alumni association or the college and university. Because when we're talking about things like rent, they're in many cases not going to punish an individual in the chapter, but the entire chapter house. If there's not money coming in, they can't pay for things. If it's a college or university, they may not renew your lease. If it's a third party, they may not renew your lease. So everyone's in the same boat. Um, Also, One of the reasons why this is important is you, as the undergraduates, as the peers, you have more influence over your friends than any third party will. Uh, if you hold them accountable, if you make the ask, they are much more likely to say yes than if I call them or if your alumni president calls them. Two, be sure to review the reports that are being submitted to us or any other party. Make sure the information is correct. These membership reports are the ones we and mostly your college and universities will use to calculate any sort of fees that will be applied to the chapter. And more of our IFCs and colleges and universities are collecting fees now, uh, per member, sometimes just per chapter. But make sure those membership reports are fair and accurate. Um, Also, one of the most important things, and you probably won't realize this now, but the purpose of fraternity is self governance. It is going to teach you skills and, well, help build skills in you that you didn't have before. You probably had some of them because you raised your hand and said, I'm willing to be treasurer. But this really is uh, a great learning experience for all of you. Also, again, that's the purpose of fraternity. It's not supposed to be us telling you what to do. It's supposed to be you managing and running your own small business. Uh, so let's get back to the budget. And when you're building a budget, there's an order to things. I love the Far Side. I've always loved the Far Side, and this is absolutely one of the comics that made me smile the most. First pants, then your shoes. So when you're building a budget, where do you start? First, income or your expenses. And we make the mistake, especially if you're looking at a profit and loss or income and expense report, income comes first. I would highly, highly, highly recommend start building your expenses first. Hopefully you have a copy of your P&L from last year, but if you don't, get access to your chapter's bank statements and start building out what it was. Uh, Second of all, go to your chairman and ask them to estimate what they feel they will need to accomplish what they want to do. Recruitment chair, how much money do you feel you need for Rush? Philanthropy chair, how much money do you feel you need to set up the philanthropic events that you want to do? Or sometimes there's a chapter fee to participate in other organizations' philanthropies. How much do they need in their budget? Talk to your social chair, talk to your alumni relations, every chairman that might have an expense. If you have a formal, make sure whoever's running that formal has a good idea of what it's going to cost. Uh, Find out if you have composites coming in and you have an agreement with the composite company, how much that's going to cost. Uh, but do your best to collect that information now so you can put together, if you haven't already, so you can put together a good budget. And trust me when I say this, just because they ask for it doesn't mean they can necessarily get it, but it gives you a good idea of what you're working with. Now, building a budget's never fun because this part, especially on the expenses, is easy. You write them all down, but then you're probably going to have a pretty big number that's going to be hard to match up because second, oops, sorry, went back. Um, we built the expenses, and there are fees associated with being a part of Psi Upsilon, like there is for any national fraternity. Next year, our member tax is going to be $230 per member per year. That's a slight increase over last year. The chapter services fee is staying the same. That's $975 each semester. And then the initiation fee will be $275 per member per year. And then the final charge we have is called the risk management assessment, and that's basically our insurance cost. Um, that I don't have the number for yet. I actually was speaking with someone just earlier today to get our bill, so I can then tell you how much it'll be for every chapter. But honestly, if you're a house chapter, it's often very similar to the member tax at 230-ish per member, and not just those living in the property. If you don't have a chapter house, it's usually closer to 200, just a little bit below that. But again, I can't give you those numbers until I get the numbers from our insurance provider. Um, Another important line to consider in the expenses, something listed here is bad debt. You could also call this uncollectible accounts. Some of our chapters do a tremendous job, and 100% of members pay in full and on time. I can assure you that's not every chapter. You have to plan for it, because the problem is if the money doesn't come in, you can't spend money on what you were expecting to do. So it's always a good idea to put a line item under expenses that kind of states, well, here's what we expect not to collect. Doesn't necessarily have to be a large number, but if you can look at outstanding bills from the prior years and use that as a guideline, or just say, okay, we don't expect to collect 5% of what our income is. Um, but it's always a good idea to have that. And again, think about things that are at your campus that you may have to spend money. Um, I mentioned earlier philanthropy. Um, Now, I'm not talking about the money you collect and donate if you're hosting an event. Oftentimes, and hopefully, if you're holding a philanthropic event, you're charging money for the participants, but then you're also any expenses the chapters has to run the event. It's perfectly appropriate to have those charges go to that, and then the money you're donating um, can't. Well, it goes to the charity that you are raising money for. Uh, Oftentimes those should be netting out at zero. You should not be holding philanthropic events to increase your income to spend elsewhere. Within the philanthropy budget, that's fine. If you're holding events to pay for your social, that is, well, quite frankly, it's immoral. And in some states, might be illegal, depending on how you do it. So don't do that. Um, I started off when talking about expenses, talking about our international fees. Um, I wish they could be free. But the reality is the cost of membership in a fraternity is not, and it can't be. Last year at the convention asked us to do a benchmarking study to just compare Psi Upsilon to our peers, and in a lot of ways other than just what we charge. But it was rather enlightening. We kind of share this information as fraternities, but I was able to be a lot more direct about it. Um, and the best way to measure what it costs to be a member of a fraternity is what we're calling here a 4-year cost. Um, Most organizations have something called a pledge fee. We don't do that in Psi Upsilon. So you take the pledge fee, the initiation fee, and then the member tax for any remaining years. Some chapters have a member tax by semester. Some do it like us per year. Some do it where the year you pay the initiation fee, you also have to pay the member tax. Uh, we just have the initiation fee alone. Um, but you add that up and you assume someone joins their freshman year and graduates their senior year. Uh, then the 4-year cost of membership gives you a way to kind of benchmark yourself against others. Um, and we don't include fixed chapter costs, and we don't include insurance with this. So our chapter services fee, our risk management fee aren't included in this, nor are they for the other national organizations that we were able to get information from. And this wasn't, I mean, I won't lie, I can't say every national fraternity gave us this information, but it was well over 40, and I think eclipsed 50. So it's a pretty good benchmark. Um, our 4-year cost with what we are going to be charging next year is $965. You look at similar fraternities that are less than 50 active chapters, it's above 1,300, and it's about 1,100 if you look at all national fraternities. It's a long way of saying we are charging less money. And that's both a good and a bad thing. We need to increase this just to stay competitive. We need to, we really do run a tight ship at the international office, and uh, we try to be incredibly mindful of spending the money we collect responsibly. But there are just some things that we need to be doing better, and increasing these fees is the only way to pay for it. The last time I took a good look at this was just prior to COVID in 2019, and we were at about the average cost. And not, we didn't raise our fees and taxes very much until I think our first increase after 2019 wasn't until 2023. I might be wrong on that, but it would have been very small amounts before that. The problem is during that period, inflation went up quite a bit, and a lot of things started costing more money. And I know for a fact, especially after talking with some of our peer organizations, some of them were pretty aggressive about raising fees, especially when inflation was, well, for a couple of years there, I think it was above 5%. It's closer to 3.5% now. But it's probably going to stay at a similar level, which is a nice way of saying you know, we need to be pretty much at least matching inflation. And quite frankly, we need to go a little bit more to that just to be able to catch up. Um, I don't want to spend too much time. I know I've talked about this a while, but I need y'all to understand when we're saying, hey, we need that money from all of you. It's, well, we need it to stay operational. We don't have large reserves in Psi Upsilon to fall back on. And the National Fraternity and National Foundation are two separate entities. Our foundation, that's where all the scholarships and the grant money and some other ways you can get money comes from, and that's where most of our donors donate to. They have reserves that we don't have access to. It wouldn't be appropriate for them to give us that money without it being in a grant form. And they do grant us money, and they are generous, and quite frankly have been getting more generous in recent years, which I'm very thankful for. But it can't go towards everything. It can't go towards general operations. It can't go towards a lot of the non-educational chapter support that we have. Um, and I do know our insurance is a bit more than probably the average if we would collect this from all organizations. And that's because insurance is how national organizations divide their insurance is handled very differently by every organization. I know what we pay per member is very reasonable, but there are some things that we do that others don't. For those of you that have ever, well, had to deal with insurance on their own, maybe you have car insurance, and especially if you got into a little bit of fender bender, you learned what a deductible is. We do not charge our chapters deductibles. We actually collect that money nationally up front. So if there are any issues, well, you've already paid in full. We don't want to have a chapter not report something to us because they have fear that they would be charged money for a deductible. And our deductibles are, well, 2,500 per occurrence, 25,000 per year. So if there's a large claim, it's much more. I mean, a $25,000 bill would, quite frankly, put a number of our chapters out of business. So that's why we collect that money up front. When we need to spend it, we spend it, and then we just refill our reserves every year. And that's why our risk management assessment tends to be a little bit more, where I know some of our peer organizations, they just charge deductibles when something comes up. Um, all right. Now that we're done talking about that fun stuff, let's talk about how you make money. And really, as a chapter, the things that you should plan on the most are your members. No matter what, the majority of your income has to be planned to be coming from your existing members. If you're not doing that, I'm fearful that you're setting yourself up for failure. I know some chapters get help from alumni associations. Some chapters are able to hold certain fundraising events that are not philanthropic in nature that can generate income or have partnerships with their colleges and universities to run events. But in no case have I ever heard of a chapter where the majority of income is coming from those ways. Um, but this is also why you need to calculate your expenses first, because now you have that number of here's all the money we think we need for the year. You also know how many members you have. Take that number, divide it, and that's your per member dues. On the first run around, that's probably going to be a pretty big number. So you need to go back to your expenses and, okay, where can we cut some fees? Or have that very real discussion about here's where we need to increase our membership dues. Uh, don't, uh, and this gives you a way to show the chapter why you're charging what you're charging. You're not just, you have a budget, you have everything laid out. You can tell the members, this is why we're asking you to, well, pay the membership dues that we are expecting. Um, Two, have some sort of fine system, late fee system. We do that in Psi Upsilon too. It's not fair for your members who pay in full and pay right away to basically have to subsidize everyone else. Um, and nationally, we will make a payment plan with any chapter that needs it, but and it has to be an agreed upon payment plan. We will uh, make sure it is something that would work within our cash flows. And as long as you're working with it, we won't charge late fees. But if you miss a payment, if you don't, if you're not being transparent about what's going on, not contacting us beforehand, then we have to charge late fees because it's not fair to the vast majority of our chapters that are paying in full and on time. Um, I talked about fundraising a little bit before. Um, and one of the, especially if you don't have a successful program in place, uh, I would connect it to optional expenses and never ever budgeting for more than you made in the prior year. Uh, it's difficult to generate and it's difficult to consistently generate it. So if you're planning, maybe you wanted to do a nice senior dinner or you wanted to upgrade the formal uh, or a different sort of improving something at your chapter house or the facility you rent, but something that wasn't necessary. If your fundraising doesn't work out, that is something you can then plan to not do and it doesn't alter the chapter in a horrible way. Um, and fundraising, oftentimes this is getting donations from your alumni association. And that's the other thing. You need to be transparent with your alumni if you're trying to raise money from your alumni. Uh, some of your alumni associations do that for you. Let them handle it. alumni are much more uh, likely to give money to the alumni association than to the undergraduate chapter. Just because, and not because of anything you all ever did, but they think back to their time and they're like, if we had that money, we might have misused it. So I'm much more confident that if I give this money to the alumni president, that it'll be used in the right way. Um, Also, keep in mind if you're holding social events in pretty much every state, you cannot charge admission to any sort of event that you're serving alcohol for. Uh, the exceptions might be if you're hosting it at a third party where they have a liquor license. But in, I believe, every state, Psi Upsilon has a chapter, you would need some form of liquor license to hold an event where you charge money and alcohol was present. It's also just a best practice not to do that. But keep that in mind. I have, and not in recent years, but many years ago, dealt with a situation that was very bad with one of our chapters where they figured out a way. They thought they could get away with charging money at events, and it worked a few times. And then the authorities found out, and the young man who was president, the young man who was treasurer, uh, well, they were held accountable, and it was not a good situation. And I can tell you the chapter lost all the money they made, and then some in fines and other charges. Um, but please do not plan to charge money for social events. And if you are, talk to me about it and I can help make sure you're in compliance the way you should be. We do have some chapters who host concerts, for instance, where no alcohol is present, and they're paying those bands fees. There's ways to do that. But again, we want to make sure they're safe, they're planned out well, and we're, well, covering all our expenses that might be necessary when we're planning how much tickets are going to cost. That's sometimes a mistake that's also made is we don't realize, oh, we just thought we could have a band. We didn't think about the sound setup or hiring security if it got large, and those fees can start to add up. Um, Also, one of the reasons why this is going to be more important than ever, and we're going to talk about a fun thing called 990s later, but every chapter that is a part of our tax exemption, which is not every chapter of Psi Upsilon. There's a number of chapters that don't have to do this. Either they use their school's tax exemption or their alumni association chose a tax exemption, or chose to file it themselves, which is perfectly appropriate. But there is a way where a number of chapters just said, hey, we're chapter Psi Upsilon, submitted some paperwork to me. And then every year I tell the IRS, yes, they are still a part of Psi Upsilon. Um, and then you file your 990 and everyone feels good about it. The IRS just changed their new rules, and any group that's a part of our group exemption, I must collect your P&L to ensure you're reporting your taxes the correct way. And I need to collect the proof that the 990 was filed. This isn't a big deal, but it is a change. I've just recently found out about it. This is just going into place. I think it was announced a couple months ago, and I'm still working out everything that we'll have to do on the side of national organization, and I'll be reaching out shortly to those chapters that must do this. Because the fun part it is it's the undergraduate chapter and the alumni association as well. Um, but we're going to talk a little bit more about your requirements to file taxes in a moment. Like I talked about before, you can balance your budget in two ways: increase income and decrease expenses. Do not accept an unbalanced budget. When you go through this process, make sure, well, it's much better to have a surplus, but make sure at the very least you are breaking even. And don't expect a miracle to occur. Like, well, we usually have 10 new members every year, but this year we're going to plan on 30 and we're going to charge them a little more. And that's what's going to balance the budget. Um, don't don't plan on miracles. And now, when you're setting dues, you also have to think about your cash flow. And what I mean by that is, well, there are certain times of year where you need more cash than you do later. In the beginning of the year, beginning of the fall, for most of our chapters, it's the most expensive time. Our insurance bills are due October 1st. So that's a hard deadline I have. And like I mentioned before, I know that's a large invoice. On top of that, the fall semester for many of our chapters is a primary recruitment time. And it's good to have cash on hand for recruitment so you can pay for stuff. So it is absolutely appropriate to have incentive plans in place to encourage early payment. Uh, from members. But you must always be taking that into account. So if you come up with your membership dues and and I'm just using round numbers off the top of my head, but you say, okay, it's going to be $500 a semester per member. But, if you pay by uh, September 1st, we'll only charge $400. Well, no, you set it at 500. What you should be saying is the membership dues are going to be $600 per semester, but if you pay by September 1st, it'll only be 500. Make sure the discounted amount is the amount you actually need to collect to break even. Plan on everyone trying to take advantage of your incentives. Um, but have something there because you all know you need that money at the beginning of fall right away. Um, people who would people who say they'll pay at the end of the semester, you're setting yourselves up for failure because, well, where's that money going to come from to get you through the semester? And in general, and this is not true of everyone, but I think it's a safe generalization. All of us have the most money in our bank accounts, or at least when we were students, at the beginning of a semester, not at the end of it. I know there's some exceptions where some people have jobs, but most people are working over the summer and have collected money for that reason. And then over the winter break, either through holiday gifts, holiday jobs, again, have the most money in their pockets at the beginning of the semester. Um, so have incentives in there to encourage early payment, but make sure you're budgeting and planning for everyone, or at least most everyone, to take advantage of those incentives. Also, thinking about due dates. Uh, Many of you start classes next week or the week after that. You should expect that first payment in right then. If you haven't sent out invoices yet to say, here's what we need to collect, please do that ASAP. Um, like I mentioned, our risk management assessment is due October 1st. If you're planning to collect your first payments from your members on October 1st, and some people are late, you're going to put yourselves in a bad position. Another thing that's important with building out this budget is share it. Review it with the chapter at least once a semester. Transparency is key with these things. It's why we publish our budget and share it with everyone at convention. If you didn't know that, if you download our convention materials, you can see our budget and our P&L. You can see a 5 years comparison of the 5 prior years of our P&L. I know many of your alumni associations look at it closely, and ask me a lot of questions, but that's a good thing. I want our members to know this is where the money is being spent. This is how it's being spent. Like I said, we're not collecting a lot per member, but we're being mindful and not wasteful. Uh, The second most important thing to make sure you have is your AR sheet, your accounts receivable. Um, this should be reviewed at all executive and chapter meetings. Every member, every amount they owe, every amount that's late, um, and how long it's late. Um, again, cash is king. You need your brothers to be paying in a timely manner. Now, at the same time, you want to be mindful and create payment plans for those who need it. But keep in mind, your creditors aren't going to delay your due dates to them because your members can't pay on time. They don't care about that. So you have to have a plan in place. Most importantly, everyone in the chapter should know, especially if someone hasn't opted into a payment plan, who isn't paying their dues, because the chapter's just at some point not going to be able to do the things that it wants to do. And you should know who those members are that are, well, putting you in that position where you can't do what you need to do. Don't keep that information private. No one can influence your fellow brothers to pay more than their brothers. It's one thing, and as chapter treasurer, you'll probably have to do this in some cases where you call people up and say, hey, pay your dues. And after a while, they'll start to realize, I'm going to just ignore Tom. He's, saying the same thing, and I just can't pay. But if every other member, all their other closer friends are also saying, hey, we we can't throw our formal this year because you decided you didn't want to pay dues. That will help move the people forward to be more responsible with their money or pay their dues. Uh, some people truly struggle. A lot of times it's just, I would say half the time it's people just being irresponsible. Also, and I just had a call last week with an alumni president where thank God his chapter was saving old AR sheets because they actually weren't doing a good job of it on the alumni association side. But keep those so you can share and work with your alumni association and say, hey, here's some people who were members of the chapter years before who didn't pay in full. Um, and again, we will help you with payment plans that we can. I will tell you right now, upfront, the risk management assessment that's due in October 1st, and that is an immovable date. That's the one thing that I cannot uh, move around at all. Initiation fees, those we shouldn't ever move because you should be collecting your initiation fees from your new members prior or at the latest at initiation. Don't wait until later. But membership taxes, uh, I can't be completely flexible with, but we can definitely, especially because we collect per year, we can split some of that out to the fall and the spring if necessary. If it's not necessary, I'd appreciate not having to do it. But I'm thankful for this. A number of our chapters uh, don't create payment plans and pay in full and on time, and that's what allows us to be flexible with some of you. Um, I've had people ask me about collection agencies for chapters for members who are delinquent. Um, it is an option you can do, especially if you have a signed agreement. But even if you're just talking about a chapter and saying, "Hey, dues are this much," you can still use collection agencies to collect from members, but realize it is a last resort. And it's usually what I would call a Pyrrhic victory. You're going to get pennies on the dollar. Someone owes you $1,000, you actually send them to a collection agency and everything happens. You might see $200 in the end out of that thousand. Um, that's collection, especially when done in full. It's a very long process and it costs a lot of money. And that's if the member does or can pay. And also, we just don't want to do it, especially if someone's uh, struggling financially, because it really can harm someone's future. Bad credit can affect loans. Uh, whether you're need to purchase a car, or a lot of rental properties will look at a credit history. Even employers will look at credit history, so it can negatively affect someone. Um, and then, and not again for the collection agency, I would put this all in writing, and I would have an agreement that here's what each member says. I understand I need to pay, and the payment schedule. Um, Reimbursements. As chapter treasurer, you're going to have a number of chairs and officers saying, hey, I need to be reimbursed for this thing. It's common. And the biggest piece of advice I would give you, well, we'll talk about some third party systems can make it even easier, but make sure all reimbursements are pre approved. Everyone knows their budget, what they can spend. And if they're asking for money above that and they didn't have permission, you do not have to reimburse them, because in many cases you can't. Two, make sure they have a receipt. Make sure they have proof that they spent the money where it was supposed to be spent. And I would do it in a reimbursement basis, and not. I see a chapter sometimes make this mistake where it's, they'll have a checking card or a debit card and just give that to the officer to spend. That can be dangerous, because all it takes is one irresponsible person who wants to go over their budget. They buy the things, and well, now what are you going to do? The money's spent. Um, that said, there are a number of third parties that can truly help you in your positions. Um, One of the most popular ones is called LegFi. It used to be called Legacy Financial. There's also Greek Bill and Omega Phi. They do a great job of, you put in your roster, where invoices need to be sent, contact information. They'll send the reminders. If someone needs to set up a payment plan, you can put it right there. So everything's automated. And many of these sites have ways that can easily uh, um, collect the money. This last symbol here, it's actually a D with an arrow, is a brand new company that I didn't know much about until a couple months ago. It's called DoFlow. They're very similar to some of these other ones I mentioned, like Legacy Financial and Greek Bill. They seem to be much less expensive. The way they may generate their income is not charging per member. It is based on the transactions and the money they collect, and they encourage it where you pass that money on to the person who's paying. For example, for it, I don't know if these are correct amounts, but it's probably around here. Uh, Anyone who wants to pay their dues by credit card, they charge 7.5%, probably something, which is a lot there, but this is where they generate their income, and they can say, okay, you as a member, you owe $100. You can walk up to the treasurer, pay in cash, and then you pay 100. If you want to pay by credit card, we need 7.5%. So you would actually be paying $107.50. Or, usually if you do a bank transfer, it's less. And, their version of Zelle, usually that's less. But it's an interesting thing. I know one of our chapters has signed up to use them next semester. Uh, I've heard from others that work in this industry that they're good. It's my understanding basically like every fraternity at the University of Virginia where they started uses them and loves them. Uh, and I think they have a pretty great platform, so I would recommend looking at them. Again, it's called DoFlow, DueFlow. If you are already working with a third party company and you love them, I don't really recommend switching. I would recommend sticking with what you know. But I do think due flow could be a good way to collect your membership dues if you need to, if you need a third party help with you. Some of our colleges will do this directly through their bursar's office. I know Hamilton College did, Duke College did. I see we have someone here from the Delta Omicron. I'm pretty sure Purdue does. So you might not need third parties like this. But a lot of times they'll have uh, budgeting information, help you to build your budget within the system, create a P&L, but the main thing is always collecting the dues. Um, Beware of using things like Venmo directly. First of all, make sure if you're using it, you are using a business account, not your personal account. This is not only, well, out of fear that if you're using your personal account, that you may accidentally, hopefully, and not on purpose, misuse some of the money that's collected, but that also, I mean, theoretically, and not theoretically, legally, if it's being paid into your personal account, you may be liable for taxes on that because you are not a nonprofit, you're a human being. So, especially in certain states, um, uh, they look at that. Usually, if it's only a couple $100, there's nothing to worry about. But this is not something we had to deal with at Psi Upsilon. But I heard a horror story about a young man who was a treasurer at an SEC school, and was collecting rent via Venmo, and a couple of years later, the IRS reached out to him and said, "Hey, here's your bill for all these uncollected taxes because Venmo, um, Zelle, PayPal, all these things they do have to report money collected over certain thresholds to the IRS, and if it's enough money or enough transactions, the IRS is going to say, "Hey, we think you need to pay this." I don't know, eBay is very much a thing anymore, but I know a lot of people who thought they were, uh, well, were making money selling things on eBay would often get bills years later because they didn't report that on their taxes. And well, when you're selling things and accepting money for it, you're going to be taxed for that. Um, Another company that I have up here that I would recommend looking at is Switch, and their website is joinswitch.com. A few of these groups, and I don't know if DoFlow does this. I know Legacy Financial does this now, but they basically work as an online bank. Legally, they're not the online bank. They have a connection with an online bank, but they open up an account for you. And with Switch, the fees are minimal. It's basically normal credit card fees. So they're not overly expensive. But this can be important because more and more I'm noticing brick and mortar banks, those physical banks, don't really want to do business with student organizations. And I don't blame them. It's a lot of work and it doesn't, there's not often a lot of money in those accounts. So, most banks aren't really making a lot of income from small student organizations, and they know at the same time it's going to take a lot of time. It's um, the amount of times I have to deal with a situation where the treasurer didn't the treasurer graduated, or whoever's name was on the checking account graduated for the chapter, moved somewhere else in the country and didn't transfer things over beforehand, and now we've got an issue, especially because in a lot of these brick and mortar banks that's not as easy to change as it should. Also, a tip, and I'll probably bring this up later, make sure you don't want everyone on the chapter to have access, signing authority, they usually call it, on your bank account. But I would have at least three: treasurer, archon, and then one of your VPs. That way, if anyone transfers or anyone graduates and disappears and or studies abroad, and things weren't done beforehand, usually those other officers then can take care of getting the right people on the checking account. Um, But again, these third party apps, and please reach out to me. I'm still collecting a little bit more information about DoFlow, but I really like what they're putting together. Switch has been incredibly helpful to some of our chapters. And like Phi, Omega Phi, Greek Bill, some of our chapters that are incredibly successful every year are using those three. Those are some of the older partners in this space. All right. Just to review some of the things to keep in mind that I talked about before. Don't rely on miracles when you're making a budget. Just a large pledge class, or all of a sudden we're going to receive all these donations from alumni. Um, you can't control that. You can't plan on it. Hey, if a miracle occurs and it happens, then you have that money to spend next semester. But don't ever plan on it. Um, Always have a little bit of a bad debt account. Don't rely or plan on everyone paying in full. Have that allowance for bad debt. Uh, it is appropriate to make payment plans and even in some cases offer financial assistance towards brothers who need it. But you have to make sure you're budgeting for it. And again, this is something, especially if you're ever offering financial assistance in undergraduate members, and I love it that you're doing that, but talk with your alumni association about it. They might be able to help more. And that's it. Our foundation can also help you with events. I told you we collect grants from them, uh, but they also have something called the Connects Grant program, which if you're holding an educational event, and it does have to be an educational event on campus, they are willing to grant up to $1,000 once a year to a chapter. But an educational event could be inviting alumni back to talk about their careers or to talk about what they're doing professionally. And it can help pay for that. But as long as it's an educational event, some of you are required on your campus to host educational events. This grant can help cover those costs. Um, we do have scholarships. They're good for the year after they're applied. For the applications start going out end of October, early November, and then they're due in the month of February. Uh, and decided upon. I know they were announced for this year April or May, but we do offer quite a number of scholarships to our undergraduate members. Now, this isn't to go towards your dues, this is to pay for your education, but it makes, if your education is getting paid for, it makes your dues easier to manage. So please follow along what the foundation's doing. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. There's also many of you have met Jonathan Chaffin, who's our director of engagement on the foundation, especially the Connect stipend, or I'm sorry, the Connect grant program. He can help walk you through that. So, another thing before we get going here that I want to make sure I cover is how we're encouraging our members to pay their dues. Are we using punishments or incentives, carrots or sticks? Um, You need both, but culture more than anything else will help encourage payments in full and timely payment. And how you build that culture is again using both carrots and sticks, but not ignoring problems. Um, as soon as someone doesn't pay, something needs to happen. Some notice needs to go out. Don't ignore late or non-payments. If someone isn't paying their membership dues to you, they should not be allowed at chapter events. Or I should put it this way, if they're not paying their dues or and aren't making an acceptable payment plan with you, you should be removing them from events. Many, if not all of our chapters have that language in their bylaws, but it needs to actually be enforced. Um, Make unexcused late payments public. Let everyone in the chapter know who's not paying. If I'm sitting in my chapter room and they find out, oh, we can't do this recruitment event we wanted because Tom Foxes didn't pay his dues on time, I'm going to feel like a jerk. I'm a lot more likely to write that check really quickly rather than just keep on ignoring it. It's private. It's much easier to ignore. The stick of fines, I wouldn't say they work well, but I think they're necessary. They often don't fix the problem, but they're a reminder. And that's a problem with fines too, is it's different for everybody. Uh, for some people who are working their way through college and working a part-time or full-time job just to help pay for things, a $10, $20 fine, that can be meaningful. That's an hour of work, 2 hours of work. Um, Whereas someone who, quite frankly, is kind of privileged and parents are helping them out, $20 fine might not be a big deal. But it serves as that reminder. So that's one of the reasons why fines can be very helpful. But most importantly, take away what they care about the most. Okay, you're not paying your dues. You can't come to our social events. Upper class seniors who are graduating, you can't be on the composite. You can't go to formal. Figure out what they want and what's important to them. And if they don't pay for it, don't let them participate, because if everyone were to act that way, that event wouldn't happen. It is the correct thing to do, and it will correct behavior better than anything else. Other members will see people being held accountable for. They're more likely to not make those mistakes as well. Um, I talked about it before, but be transparent with your budget. Make sure everyone knows how their money's being spent. That will make it easier and them to feel better about what they're paying. Um, During rush, it's always difficult because we're trying to sell our fraternity to members. But I will tell you, it's flat out unethical if we're not upfront to talk to them about the dues that are associated with this. I've heard about a couple chapters, and I haven't seen this in recent years, who would withhold that information until like the last week of member education, be like, oh, by the way, this costs money. And some people don't realize that. And I mean, that's just wrong uh, to act that way. I'm not saying the first day you meet them, you say, oh, by the way, here's what dues are, but make sure you have that discussion with everyone before they accept their bid. Treat them like an adult, they will respect it. Um, Initiation fees, make sure you collect those before or at initiation. Um, and always do your best. At the end of this semester, let everyone know what their dues will be for the beginning of next. All right, home stretch here. Uh, and just some terms and ways I want to talk about some things. Um, all of you are members of a chapter of Psi Upsilon, and a chapter has two parts: the undergraduate chapter, which I'm presuming you're all the treasurer for, and then the alumni association. You work together, but you are separate organizations, even though we consider that one chapter. Um, Many of you have heard the term nonprofit before, but there's all different kinds of nonprofits, and it's not a universal term. For instance, all of us as chapters in Psi Upsilon as a national fraternity is known as a 501c7 uh, form of nonprofit that's known as a social organization. That is very different than your college or university, which is a nonprofit, or our foundation, which is a 501c3 nonprofit, a charity. A lot of charities, those are 501c3s, very different things. So a lot of times when there's certain rights for nonprofits, like, hey, people who donate to us, you can write that out off of your income taxes. That's not true for us 501c7s. That's not allowed. That's for the charities and the universities. Um, Most of you have what's known as a tax ID number. Uh, Legally, it's usually called an employment identification number or an EIN. Uh, these are public. We can help you find it if you don't have it. But this is like a social security number for a business. The most common reason every chapter has it and needs it is because you need it to open a bank account. But this is also what's used to file your taxes every year. Those taxes are called a 990. And there's different forms of it. And luckily, for most of you, it is very easy to file, and you can do so online and for free on the IRS website. If your income is less than 25,000, uh, you can file what's known as the 990N or the Easy Postcard online. If it's greater than 25,000 but less than 100, I believe, um, there's something called the 990EZ, which also can be filed online. Um, and it's not too difficult to file these. Usually, when you have to file your taxes, you have to basically give full income and expense report. If it's the 990N or the 990EZ, you don't need to do that. You just need to confirm the amount of income you had in the aggregate. Or in the case of the 990N, I think all you have to do is say, hey, it was less than 25,000. Um, if you ever have to file a full 990, if you're collecting more than 100,000, work with your alumni association. Please don't do that on your own. In some cases, I believe we're at a campus where the university walks the chapter through this. But a regular 990, that gets to be a lot more complex. And I know nowadays with AI, everyone's like, hey, Claude, fill out this 990 for me. Please don't do that. It's uh, things are getting easier and better, but there's still dumb mistakes, and I don't want you to fall into them. But all of us, every single chapter that has a tax ID number must file a 990 every year. What happens is if you don't, you can lose your nonprofit status, which then means all income, any membership dues, for instance, that you collect is now taxable income. Um, and to get reinstated as a nonprofit, if you lose that status, honestly, the IRS isn't completely transparent about the process. I know it can cost a lot of money. There are ways I've been told where you, as long as you weren't too egregious with your mistakes, any fines and penalties seem to be waived, but still you need to work with an accountant to do that, and it's going to cost you over $1,000, less than five. But it's it's going to cost some real money. Um, we use a company called file990.org that will send out reminders to all chapter presidents and treasurers when it's time to pay your taxes if we have your tax ID number. Um, and like I mentioned before, starting this year and I'm figuring out the system, I must collect all profit and loss statements for every chapter that's a part of our group exemption. I'll be reaching out to everyone who is. I'm sorry, I don't know the information off the top of my head, but about half our chapters and alumni associations use our group exemption. Um, with the chapter checking account, make sure it's in the chapter's name. And again, don't use your personal checking account as a chapter checking account. Include, I would recommend definitely at least two. I would recommend three officers to be named on the account, or not named, but have signing authority on the account. Yourself as treasurer, the chapter president, and then I would have another VP. You don't want too many because, well, not everyone should have access to that, but you don't want only one because what happens if that person transfers or studies abroad or graduates and that information doesn't get updated? It could become a problem. Um, if you have a check card or debit card, use it sparingly and don't share it. If someone needs to spend it, money from it, go with them to make sure they're spending the money that they need to. But I would really recommend moving to a reimbursement schedule. One of those companies I talked about before, LegFi, and I think more and more groups are doing this, they will set up through something like Google Pay, a you can put money into their account for whatever their budget is, or let's say, okay, this person has to go to the store and pick up $50 worth of supplies for our recruitment barbecue. Here's $50 into that person's account. Uh, um, or even like LegFi, they will send you physical debit cards if you need those. I think it, it's a better way than to give just someone an overall checking card. Um, but and especially if you have questions, please reach out to me. But I really recommend using companies like DoFlow, Switch, LegFi. These can help quite a bit. All right, we're just over our hour mark. That's where I was hoping to keep this at. But do any of you, oh, I do see something. Bennett, yeah, your chapter uses My Greek. I'm actually not familiar with them. Um, there's more and more groups in this marketplace. So um, glad to hear it. And I'm interested in how that goes. Um, but all right, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.